At some point of your life you did something that surprised you. Maybe you walked away from something safe.
I'm free now.
Maybe you built something from nothing when there was no guarantee that it would work. Maybe you found yourself in a crisis and instead of breaking, something inside you took over. Something older than your habit, something deeper than your personality. And you thought, where did it come from? That is your archetype, not a personality test, not a label someone gave you. Something that Carl Jung spent his life trying to map. The inherited psychological structures that exists in every human being, that shape how you see world, what you are drawn to, what you fear, and ultimately who you become. There are 12 of them, and one of them or two of them is running your life right now, whether you know it or not. I want to tell you how I find mine, not through a quiz, not through a book, through complete collapse. A few years ago I was deep in addiction, and I want to be specific about what that means. Not just substances, but complete identity loss. I didn't know who I was. I had borrowed pieces from everywhere, the person my environment expected, the person my relationship needed, the person I performed to survive. And then the substances took that performance apart. And then psychosis took apart whatever was left. When I came back from that, when I was rebuilding from essentially nothing, I had to ask a question I'd never honestly asked before. Who am I? Actually, not who was I trained to be, not who do people need me to be. Who am I underneath all of that? And the answer that kept emerging through therapy, through reflection, through the slow works of years was always the same two things: explorer and the creator. That part of me that needed to live, to move in different countries, to seek new experiences, to refuse to stay where the safety was the only reason. And the part that needed to build, to make things, to share what I understand, to turn lived experience into something that might help someone else. Those learned personality traits, they were there before the addiction. They survived the psychosis. They were what remained when everything I'd performed were stripped away. That's what Jung meant by archetype, not what you become, what you already are. Let me show you all 12. Carl Jung believed that beyond the personality, unconscious, beneath your specific memories and experiences, there exists a deeper level. He called it the collective unconscious, a shared psychological inheritance that every human being carries, not learned, not taught, inherited. Within this layer lives the archetype, universal patterns of character and motivation that appears across all the cultures. Every mythology, every story humans have ever taught. The hero, the outlaw, the sage, they appear in ancient Greek myths, in Shakespeare, in modern cinema, because they come from something deeper than a culture. They come from what it means to be a human. Jung identified 12 different archetypes. Each one has a core desire, a core fear, and a shadow side, and the gift when integrated consciously. You carry all 12 at some degree, but one or two are dominant, and those dominant archetypes are quietly shaping your every major decision in your life. Let's go through all of them. The innocent, core desire to be happy, to live in paradise, to be safe. Core fear, punishment, being wrong, doing something bad. The innocent sees the world as fundamentally good.
Hi, what's up? Haha.
They believe in second chances, in fresh starts, in the possibility that things can be simple and beautiful. At their best, they bring joy, optimism, and trust. They remind people that wonder is possible. The shadow of the innocent is naivety, the refusal to see what actually there, the insistence on paradise when reality demands engagement. Does this sound like someone you know, or a part of yourself you protect very carefully? The everyman, core desire to belong, to connect, to fit in. Core fear standing out too much, being rejected or being left behind. The everyman is the most relatable archetype because they are trying to be relatable. They value community over status, real connections over recognition. At their best, they create belonging. They make people feel seen and accept exactly as they are. The shadow losing themselves in the crowd, shrinking their truth to maintain their acceptance, never fully showing what they actually think, because what if it separates them from a group? The hero, core desire to prove themselves through courage. When everything says stop, then they find themselves but what they overcome. At their best, inspiring, courage, capable. The person who shows others what's possible when you don't quit. The shadow, the hero who can actually live only in struggle, who manufactures obstacles when real ones doesn't exist, whose identity collapses without a battle to fight. And here's something worth sitting with. A lot of people in self-improvement culture are stuck in hero's shadow, always fighting, never resting, because without a fight, who are they? The caregiver, core desire to protect and care about others. Core fear, selfishness, being accused of not caring. The caregiver puts others first. They are the ones who notice when something is wrong and move toward it rather than away. At their best, nurturing, generous.
Smells incredible.
It's almost ready.
The person who holds the room together. The shadow martyrdom, giving endlessly until there's nothing left, and then resenting the people they gave to. Caring for others as a way of not dealing with themselves. They explore, core desire experiences, freedom, authentic selfhood discovered through movement. Core fear being trapped, conformity, inner emptiness. The explorer cannot stay still, not because they are running, because the movement is how they find themselves. Every new country, every unfamiliar situation, every departure from what was comfortable is a step towards what's real. At their best, free, adventurous, self-reliant. The person who discovers things others never see, because they went somewhere others didn't want to go. The shadow, relentless as avoidant, moving before anything gets real, calling flight freedom. I know this shadow well. I lived in multiple countries, and I've had to ask myself, am I seeking something or am I leaving something? Sometimes the honest answer was both. The outlaw. Core desire, revolution, disruption, freedom from rules that don't serve truth. Core fear, powerlessness, conformity, being controlled. The outlaw question everything. They see the system, cultural, psychological, and they push against them, not out of rebellion for its own sake, but because something in them can't accept a rule they haven't chosen to believe in. At their best, catalyst for change, the people who break what needed breaking, say what everyone thought but nobody said. The shadow, destruction without creation, without building anything better, mistaking provocation for truth. The magician.
Mortis et lux.
Core desire, understanding the fundamental laws of the universe and using them to make things happen. Core fear, unintended negative consequences, dark magic and losing control. The magician transforms. They take what is and make it into what could be. They understand the reality is more fluid than other people, and they use that understanding deliberately. At their best, visionary, transformative, the person who changes rooms and lives. The shadow, manipulation, using their understanding of how things work to bend situations and people toward personal gain. The magician who stops serving transformation and starts serving themselves. The ruler. Core desire, control, order, creating prosperity and stability. Core fear, chaos, being overthrown, losing control. The ruler takes responsibility, not because they want power, because they cannot stand disorder. They create systems, lead teams.
Subscribe on ShigaPOV channel. Subscribe on ShigaPOV channel.
Hold structures together. At their best, organized, visionary, the steady force that makes it possible for everyone else to function. The shadow, tyranny, control that serves the controller rather than the people behind it. The ruler who mistakes their comfort with order for everyone else's need to be controlled. The creator. create something of enduring value. Core fear, having a mediocre vision or execution, create something that will not last. The creator cannot not make things. It's not a hobby, it's not an ambition. It's a compulsion toward expression. The creator looks at what exists and sees what could exist and cannot rest until they've tried to bring it into being. At their best, innovative, expressive.
I see it now. The path is clear. No longer a mystery, just execution.
The person whose work outlasts them and touches people they will never meet. The shadow perfectionism as a paralysis. The creator who never releases anything because it isn't good enough yet. The work that exists only in their head because the gap between vision and execution is too painful. This one I know from the inside. 2 years of this channel. Every video a negotiation between what I imagined and what I made. Learning to release anyway. Learning that imperfect and real is always more valuable than perfect and visible. The Sage.
It gave me fatigue.
Core desire to find the truth, to understand the world as it actually is. Core fear being deceived, ignorance, being wrong. The Sage pursues understanding above everything. They read, they study, they question, not to perform intelligence, but because not knowing something
So that's
feels
the plan?
intolerable. At their best, wise, clear thinking. The person whose perspective shifts how you see something permanently. The shadow, endless analysis, never action. Knowing everything about the problem and doing nothing about it. Mistaking understanding for change. The Jester. Core desire to live in the moment with full enjoyment, to play. Core fear boredom, being seen as boring, not mattering. The Jester brings levity. They find what's funny in what's serious.
Yeah.
They use humor not to avoid the truth, but to make the truth bearable enough to look at it. At their best, the person who makes the room breathe, to release the tension that everyone else is holding. Because lightness is a form of service. The shadow is use humor to avoid everything real. The joke as a deflection. The laughter that keeps intimacy away. Never being taken too seriously because the Jester never let everyone see them, never let anyone see them seriously. The Lover. For desire intimacy, connection, expressing and sharing love in all of its forms. For fear being alone, being unloved, being unwanted. The Lover is not just a romantic love, it's the archetype of passion for everything. People, beauty, ideas, experiences. The Lover commits fully. They bring intensity and presence to everything they touch. At their best, deeply connected, sensual and alive. The person who makes others truly seen and truly felt. The shadow losing themselves in others. Love that becomes dependency. Passion that becomes possession. The lover who needs the connection so badly, they reshape themselves to keep it and disappears in the process. So how do you actually find yours? Not with the quiz. Quizzes give you what you want to see. Here's what actually works. First, look at your decisions, not your values. You can tell me your values all day. What you actually choose under pressure when it costs something. That's where your archetype lives. Do you live when things get safe? Explorer. Do you build even when no one is watching? Creator. Do you stay when everyone else walks away? Caregiver or a hero? Do you question the rule before you follow it? Outlaw. Second, look at your shadow. Your dominant archetype's shadow is usually your most persistent pattern. The problem you keep having in the relationships. The way you sabotage yourself at the same moment every time. The thing closest people to you have noticed and tried to tell you about that you dismissed or explained away. The pattern is almost every time your shadow of your archetype is operating without your awareness. Third, look at what you can't not do. Not what you are good at, not what people praise you for. What you would do if everyone will not know, even if it's never paid, even if it costs you something. That compulsion, unavoidable pull, that's your archetype at its most honest. I spent years not knowing what I was, trying on identities that don't fit in, borrowing purposes that weren't mine, building lives that looked right from the outside and felt wrong inside. And the path back to myself wasn't a decision, it was a stripping away. When everything I performed was gone, when addiction took the performance and the psychosis took what's left, what remained was explorer and the creator. Still curious, still making things, even at the bottom. Jung didn't invent your archetype, he just gave you the map, what's already there. The question isn't what archetype you want to be, it's which one you already are. Underneath everything you thought to be, everything you built to survive, the version of you has been there the whole time. And it's the most interesting person in a room. You've tried discipline, you set an alarm earlier, build the morning routine and cut the distractions. Read a book about atomic habits and made a spreadsheet and tracked it. And it worked for a while. Maybe 2 weeks, maybe 1 month. And then something happened. The alarm felt harder, the routine felt hollow. The streak broke and instead of restarting, you just stopped and you told yourself the same thing you tell yourself every time. I don't have enough discipline. I need to be stronger, more consistent and more committed. But what if that's the wrong diagnosis completely? What if discipline isn't the thing that saves you?
Yeah.
But the thing that shows up automatically when something else is already in place. I spent years trying to discipline my way out from where I was. During the addiction, I tried to discipline myself into stopping, white knocking through days, building rules, creating systems. Every single one collapsed. Not because I wasn't trying, because discipline alone cannot override something that is meeting a real psychological need. The substances were doing something for me. They were managing anxiety, creating numbness, providing relief from something I couldn't look at directly. No amount of discipline going to change that until I understood what the behavior was for. And after the recovery, I made the same mistake in the opposite direction. I became aggressively disciplined. 5 a.m. cold showers and no days off. I was using a discipline like a weapon against myself, as punishment for everything I'd been.
I see it now, the path is clear. No longer a mystery, just execution.
And it looked impressive from the outside, and it felt like a control, but it was just another form of avoidance, dressed up in a productivity clothing. Real change that actually lasted didn't come from discipline. It came from something I didn't have a word for, until I started understanding the psychology behind it. Here's the distinction that changed everything for me. Discipline is force applied against resistance. Motivation is a force that moves with something. When you are disciplined, you are pushing. When you are genuinely motivated, you are being pulled. And here's a thing between pulling and pushing. Pulling is sustainable, pushing isn't. You can only push for so long before your arms give out. But if something genuinely pulling you, the question isn't whether you will show up. The question is whether you will ever stop. Psychologists call this intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. Extrinsic, doing something for the external reward, the streak, the approval, the outcome. Discipline is almost always extrinsic. You are doing the thing to get something else. And when something else feels far away, or when you've had a bad day, the discipline crumbles. Because the foundation was never internal. Intrinsic, doing something because the doing itself has a meaning.
Subscribe on ShigaPOV channel. Subscribe on ShigaPOV channel.
Value or genuine connection to who you are and what you actually care about. When something is intrinsically motivated, it doesn't require a discipline. You show up because not showing up would feel like abandoning something that is yours. Think about the last time you did something and completely lost track of time, where you forgot to check your phone, where the hour felt like 10 minutes. Did that require discipline? No, because you was intrinsically motivated. The activity itself was a reward. Real change doesn't come from learning to push harder. It comes from finding what pulls you and then building a life in that direction. There is a psychological concept called ego depletion. The theory is still debated, but directionally accurate, is that willpower is a finite resource. Every decision you Make every temptation you resist, every time you force yourself to do something you don't want to, draws from the same pool. And when the pool runs dry, discipline collapses. Not because you are weak, because you ran out of resources you were using to sustain it. This is why discipline fails at the same point. When you are tired, stressed, emotionally depleted. After a hard day, late at night, when the context changes. These aren't failures of character. They are the predictable resource of a system that runs on a depletable resource. Intrinsic motivation doesn't work like this. When something is genuinely yours, it draws from different place entirely. Not willpower, not force, not pushing, recognition. The quiet knowledge that this is mine. And showing up for this is showing up for yourself. So what do I actually do with this? First, audit your current discipline attempts. For every habit, routine or behavior you have been trying to force yourself through discipline. Ask one honest question. Is this something I genuinely want, or is this something I think I should have? The should want category is where discipline goes to die. You will never do sustainably something that isn't connected to what you actually value. No matter how good your system is. Second, find an intrinsic thread for the things you do want. Dig until you find why, not the surface reason, the real one underneath it. I post videos because I want to grow channel. That's the surface reason. And discipline runs it when it's hard. I post videos because creating and sharing what I understand is the most alive I feel. Because the explorer and the creator in me have no other home. Because if I stop, something fundamental will be missing. That's the intrinsic thread. Find yours, because when you connect it to that, discipline becomes irrelevant. You show up because you can't not. Third, design your environment for your behavior. This is a discipline hack that actually works. No more willpower, but less resistance. Remove the friction from what you want to do. Add friction to what you don't. Your environment shapes behavior more reliably than your willpower ever will, and it doesn't deplete. I still have days when showing up feels so hard, but the difference between now and before, between the person who tried to discipline himself into recovery and the person making this video, is not that I became more disciplined. It's that I got honest about what I actually want, about what's actually mine, about what's I actually building and why. Discipline is not a foundation. It's whether unreliable, seasonal, dependent on conditions. Identity is a foundation. Values are the foundation.
Wow.
The deep, honest answer to the question, what am I actually here to do? That's the foundation. Build on that. And what looks like a discipline from the outside is just someone doing what they were always going to do. Everyone tells you to chase your dreams. Follow your passion, trust the process, do what you love, and the money will follow. Build it and they will come. Nobody tells you what happens in between. The years where nothing follows yet, the months where you build and nobody comes. A path that most people around you can fully see or understand. I'm not here to tell you not to chase your dreams. I'm still chasing mine. But I'm here to tell you the things I wish someone told me before I started. 6 lessons, all of them learned the hard way, all of them true. I've been building ShigaPOV for 2 years. Before that, I ran a business with my brother. We built it from nothing, worked it into something real.
I see it now, the path is clear. No longer a mystery, just execution.
And sold it before the market changed. That was a win.
Yeah.
But even wins have lessons inside them. I've been through addiction and rebuilt from it. I've been through a conscious breakup, and it's something I loved. because the direction was wrong. I've lived in Thailand and Bali, chased the version of freedom I thought I wanted before I understood what I was actually looking for. What I know about chasing dreams comes from actually doing it, across multiple domains, across multiple failures and real wins, across years of choosing uncertain path when the certain one was actually available. These are 6 things that path taught me. I couldn't have read my way into understanding this. The first harsh lesson: the dream you start chasing is almost never the dream you end up living. When I started this channel, I had a specific vision, a specific kind of content, a specific audience. A specific version of success that I was moving toward. 2 years in, the channel is real, but it doesn't look like I was imagined. It looks like something better, and something harder, and something that I couldn't have designed from the beginning, because I didn't yet know what I actually had to say. The dream involves the vision updates. What you think you want at the start is usually a rough draft of what you actually want. The harsh part: many people quit when the dream starts changing, because they mistake evolution of their vision for evidence that they were wrong to start. They weren't wrong, they were just early. Nobody warns you about that. When you choose a path that the most people around you aren't on, the distance grows. Not because relationship breaks dramatically, because the gap in shared experience widens quietly. The people you love are still there, but the specific thing that you are doing, the specific world you are living in, they can't fully enter it with you. I felt this in the 2 years of building this channel, in the months of sharing with almost no one, in the specific loneliness of creating something you believe in without yet having the evidence that anyone else does. The loneliness isn't a sign that you do something wrong. It's a specific cost of making that you actually want, and learning to carry it, to keep creating without immediate validation of being understood, is one of the most important skills the path will ask you for. There is a long period, sometimes months, sometimes years, when nothing visible is happening, where the work is going in and nothing seems to be coming out, when the metrics stay flat and the audience stays small, and every rational argument says you should redirect your energy somewhere with more return. And then seemingly suddenly something shift. A video finds its audience, a skill compounds, a connection happens that couldn't have happened without invisible years before it. The bamboo plant seeds spends its first 4 years growing entirely underground. You see nothing the roots are building. In the first year it grows 19 feet in 6 weeks. I'm in the bamboo phase with this channel. I know the roots are building. I can't always see them, but I know because the work keeps revealing things about the craft that only comes from doing long enough in the invisible years. Don't quit the bamboo phase. That's the only lesson that actually matters. Nobody tells you that chasing your dreams will require you to become something new, and that becoming that person means that old version of this person had to dissolve. I went through this during the addiction. I went through it in recovery. I went through this when I closed the business and redirected everything into creative work.
Subscribe on ShigaPOV channel. Subscribe on ShigaPOV channel.
Every time the dream requires a new version of me, the transition was unforgettable. There was a period where I didn't quite fit into what I was before and hadn't fully arrived at who I will become. The gap, the identity transition zone, is where most people quit. Not because the work is too hard, but because they don't recognize themselves anymore and mistakes that disorientation for being lost when actually they are just becoming. This one surprised me the most. When the business sold, I expected celebration. I got relief, then a strange flatness. When a video did well, I expected sustained satisfaction. I got a moment of it, and then the next video was already pulling at me. The wins arrive, they were real, but they don't feel the way you imagined when you were grinding toward them. Psychology calls this arrival fallacy, the gap between imagined arrival and actual arrival. But the deeper lesson isn't that wins don't matter, it's that the wins are not the point. The point is who you become in the pursuit. The point is the craft getting sharper. The point is understanding deepening. The wins are evidence, not a destination. Learn to feel them and then keep moving. The doubt doesn't arrive when things are going badly. It arrives when you are the most exposed, when you are committed to something publicly, when you've gone too far to easily turn back, when you've started building something real enough to be worth losing. That's when the voice gets loudest. What do you think you are? What makes you qualified? What if nothing of this works? I felt this at every significant moment of building this channel. And the only honest thing I can tell you that the doubt is not a signal to stop.
It is a lie. They know.
The doubt is a signal that you are doing something right. Safe things doesn't generate things like that, the resistance like that. Only things that matter generate resistance like that. The question is never will the doubt arrive. It will. The question is, what do you do when it does? The answer I keep coming back to, you keep going anyway. Not because the fear goes away, but because the alternative,
Subscribe on ShigaPOV channel.
a life shaped by fear, is the only outcome that would actually be a failure. 2 years, still building, still learning, still in a bamboo phase in many ways. And I wouldn't undo any of the harsh lessons. Not the loneliness, not the identity dissolving, not the wins that felt different from what expected, not the doubt that arrives at the worst moment. Because each one taught me something that the comfortable path will never taught me. Chasing your dreams is not a story with finishing line. It's a way of being in your own life, a commitment to the ongoing process of becoming who you're actually capable of being at the cost of who you currently are. That cost is real, but so is what you get for it. There is a moment most people who call themselves disciplined never talk about. The moment your body says stop and you keep going anyway, and you call that strength. I did that for almost 2 years. I called it warrior mindset. It wasn't. It was something closer to punishing myself, wearing a stronger word. Near the end of this, I will tell you exact moment I find out the difference. It's not what you would expect. And it's the reason I train differently, work differently and feel every video on this channel differently. But first, you need to see how bad it actually got. It was 4 a.m. I was still awake. Filming a video, editing the last one, replying to supplier emails. For a vaping business my brother and I was running. 3 jobs stacked on each other. And I haven't slept properly in 5 days. My hands were shaking and not from cold. I remember thinking, this is what it takes. This is the warrior mindset. You push through the shaking, you push through the exhaustion. Real discipline doesn't stop for tired. My phone rang. My brother. I almost didn't answer it. I will come back to what he said, because right after that call, something happened that scared me more.
Subscribe on ShigaPOV channel.
Than anything that he could have told me. I was in the kitchen making coffee, standing at the counter, and I blacked out. 4 seconds, maybe 5. I came back to myself on the floor. Coffee everywhere, no memory of falling. Here's the part that actually matters. My first thought wasn't, I need to rest. My first thought was, I can't let this slow me down. That's where I understand that something is wrong. Not with my schedule, with how I was defining strength itself. I will tell you what my brother said on that call, and why 4 seconds on the kitchen floor changed how I think about willpower completely. But first, you need to understand why the body does this to a person who refuses to stop. Here's what nobody tells you about the willpower. It's not infinite. Psychology calls this ego depletion. Every act of self-control draws from the same limited resource. Every time you force yourself through exhaustion, instead of resting, you are not building resource. You are spending it faster than it refills. I was treating my willpower like it was unlimited, like a warrior who never needs to reload. It's not what actually warrior is. A warrior conserves energy for a fight that matters. What I was doing had a different name. Psychologists call this hyperproductivity. using constant motion to avoid something underneath. I wasn't avoiding laziness, I was avoiding stillness, because stillness meant everything I'd been outrunning. The exhaustion, the feeling that this channel won't work.
I can't do this anymore. I'm so tired. Okay.
The tension with my brother over how the business was run. Moving fast felt like a control. It wasn't control, it was escape wearing a costume. If this landing for you right now, the like button helps to reach other people who need this. And drop a comment, have you ever confused exhaustion with strength? Here's the call from my brother. He told me he was stepping back from a daily grind of the business, not because he was weak, because he'd already understood that I hadn't. He said, you are running like someone chasing you. Nothing is chasing you anymore. You already survived the thing. That landed harder than 4 seconds on the floor. There is a difference between extrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic means you are moving towards something you actually want. Extrinsic means that you're moving away from a fear that's already behind you. I was running from a version of myself I used to be. Addiction, psychosis, failure. And I was using speed to prove that version was gone. But you can't outrun a ghost by moving faster. You can only turn around and see it's not chasing you anymore. That was the real difference between real warrior mindset and what was I actually doing. A warrior fights forward. I was fighting backward at a version of myself that already lost the power over me 5 years ago. This is what actually helped me shift it, not theory, what I changed. I stopped treating rest as a reward that I need to earn. For years, I only allowed myself to stop once I'd proven that I deserve it. Now I rest on a schedule, not a permission system. It felt wrong the first few weeks. Rest still feels wrong to me now. I start asking what I was running from before I start running. Before I open my laptop at midnight, I ask myself one question. Am I moving toward the video?
I see it now. The path is clear. No longer a mystery, just execution.
Or away from sitting still with how I feel today. Some nights the honest answer is the second one. On those nights I close laptop. I gave the 4 seconds on the floor in the kitchen a name. That blackout wasn't weakness. It was my body doing the one thing my mind refused to do. Forcing a stop. I stopped treating it as a failure and start treating it as the most honest feedback I ever got.
Subscribe on ShigaPOV channel. Subscribe on ShigaPOV channel.
Ego depletion isn't a character flaw, it's biology asking to be respected. I separated business decision from an identity decision. My brother stepping back from daily operation wasn't him giving up. It let us sell the business before the regulations hit, at the point where we both still respected the work we'd built.
Yeah.
Sometimes stepping back is a strategic move, not the weak one. None of that made the drive disappear. I still work hard, I still film 2 videos a week, still push toward the goal I want. The difference is I'm not going it to prove the ghost wrong. That's the shift nobody tells you about. And it's the one that actually holds long term instead of collapsing on a kitchen floor. Here's the realization I promised you at the beginning. The warrior mindset is never about never stopping. It was about knowing what fight is actually matters and having a discipline to walk away from every fight that isn't. I thought strength meant that I could push through anything. Real strength turned out to be knowing when pushing was the wrong move entirely. I still grow bonsai now, slowly over months, because it's the opposite of everything that broke me. It can't be rushed. It punishes speed, it rewards patience. I'm not telling you to stop working hard. I'm telling you to ask yourself what you are actually running from before you call the running discipline. Everyone talks about meditation like it's some kind of superpower. Lower cortisol, better focus, emotional regulation, and rewire your brain. Become the calm person in the room who never gets rattled by anything. I'd heard all of it, and I was skeptical of all of it, so I decided to test it properly. 7 months every single day, no days off, and tracked consistently, starting from someone who had never meditated seriously and generally don't know what to expect. What happened over those 7 months was not what the wellness industry promised. Some of it was better, some of it was harder. And the most important thing had nothing to do with the benefits I was looking for. I want to be honest about why I started this. It wasn't curiosity, it wasn't wellness goal. It was an ability to stay still. I mentioned this in my another video. I can only truly rest with alcohol or sleep. Everything else feels like a wasted time. The silence feels like falling behind. The restlessness which I'd lived with so long, I'd stopped noticing it, was starting to cost me. Inequality of my thinking, inequality of my creative work. In a relationship where my attention kept drifting to whatever I hadn't built yet. Meditation felt like most direct confrontation with the thing I was avoiding, not relaxation, confrontation. Sitting with myself with no input, no productivity, no hide behind, and seeing what was actually there. That was the experiment. Month 1, the noise. The first thing I noticed how loud it was inside my head. Not sound, thought, the constant relentless, the constant stream of thinking and planning, worrying, creating or solving. I'd always known that this stream existed. What I hadn't understood is how was loud it, until I tried to sit quietly with it for 20 minutes. The first 2 weeks felt like a failure. My mind wouldn't stop. I couldn't focus, I kept opening my eyes to check the timer. What the book says, that's normal. What I felt, I'm doing this wrong. By the week 3, something shifted, not the stream stopping. The relationship to it changes. I started to notice the thought arriving before I was already made it. The gap, tiny, barely there, was new. Month 2 and 3, the gap widens. By month 2, the practice becomes a routine. 15 minutes every morning before anything else. And the gap I noticed in week 3 started to appear in waking life too. In a conversation where someone said something that would usually trigger automatic reaction. I noticed the reaction forming before it had fully formed. That half second of awareness, that tiny space between stimulus and response was the most significant change of those 3 months. Not calm exactly, the awareness of not being calm, which turns to be more useful. Month 4, the difficult middle. This is where nobody warns you. The honeymoon of a new practice is over. The dramatic beginner inside have settled, and what you are left with is just sitting every morning with yourself, with everything you haven't processed, with the things you've been busy to feel. Month 4 brought a material I hadn't fully expected. Grief I'd been carrying without labeling, anger about things I declared to resolve, the specific loneliness of a person who moves fast enough to stay ahead of themselves until they sit down and stop moving. Not peace, clarity, not calm, perspective, the ability to watch a thought and not to be it, to feel the emotion and not perform it, to sit with discomfort long enough to understand what it's actually telling me rather than moving immediately to manage it. 7 months in, here's the honest breakdown. What's genuinely real? The gap between stimulus and response, completely real. This is the most practically useful change and it compounds over time. The half second of awareness before a reaction becomes a behavior. This is where the conscious choice lives. The quality of creative thinking improves. The ideas that comes in meditation, the ones that arrives in a genuine stillness, are consistently more interesting than ideas that arrives in active thinking. Something about stopping the noise creates a space for a signal. The relationship with discomfort when you mentally changed. Sitting with something uncomfortable for 20 minutes every morning without moving to fix it or escape it changed my tolerance for discomfort everywhere. What's overhyped? The emotional regulation miracle, not what they promised. I still get triggered, I still react. I'm just sometimes aware of the reaction a fraction of a second before I incite it. That's valuable, but that's not the superhuman equanimity the meditation industry sells. The anxiety cure? No, my restlessness wasn't resolved by meditation. It was illuminated, which is different. I understand it better, I had to face it directly. But the drive, the noise, the inability to rest, still present and just more visible. What surprised me the most, the material that surfaced in a difficult middle, the grief, the anger, the things that came up when I stopped moving fast enough to outrun them. That was the most important result of that experiment, not the benefits I was looking for, the inventory I didn't know I needed. If you want to try this, here's what actually helps. Start shorter than you think. Everyone says start with 5 minutes. I say start with 2. 2 minutes of genuine stillness is harder than you think. Build a tolerance before you build the duration. Expect the noise and don't fight it. The goal of meditation is not an empty mind. It never was. The goal is to notice the thought, let it pass and return to the breath. That noticing and returning, done thousands of times, is the practice, not the silence. Sit with what comes up.
Subscribe on ShigaPOV channel.
When something uncomfortable surfaces, an emotion, a memory, a feeling you've been outrunning, try not to manage it immediately. Sit with it for one more breath and another. That practice, staying with discomfort long enough to understand it, is the most transferable skill meditation actually builds. I still meditate, not every day anymore. I want to be honest about that. 5 or 6 times a week. The daily streak ended at around 5 months and I stopped trying to rebuild it.
Hi, what's up? Haha.
Because practice mattered more than the streak. What 7 months of sitting with myself taught me was not what I expected to learn. I expected relaxation, I found confrontation. I expected calm, I found clarity what was disturbing calm. I expected the noise to stop, I found that the noise is information. And that the practice isn't about silencing, but about hearing it differently. If you've been avoiding meditation because it sounds boring, you're not wrong. It's boring. It's also one of the most honest things you can do with 20 minutes of your morning. Sit down, stop moving, see what's actually there. Failure doesn't just take the thing. It takes the story you told yourself about who you were based on the thing. When the businesses went wrong, it wasn't just the money, the effort, the time. It was the version of yourself that was going to exist on the other side of the business succeeding. When the relationship ended,
Just say it.
I can't.
it wasn't just the person. It was the future you'd be building in your mind. The version of your life that included them. When the channel stayed at 0,
What is happening? I won't let this define me.
it wasn't just the numbers. It was the question underneath the numbers. Maybe I'm not the person I thought I was. Failure has a secondary wound. And the secondary wound is almost every time worse than failure itself. I want to tell you about a specific moment. I've been building something for a long time.
I see it now. The path is clear. No longer a mystery, just execution.
Putting real effort, real belief, real identity into it. And it failed, not dramatically, not in a single moment. The way most failure actually happened, gradually, then obviously, then finally accepted. And what I felt wasn't what I expected. I expected sadness, I expected frustration, I expected the practical weight of what to do next. What I actually felt, I can't explain for a long time. It was shame. Not about the failure, about myself, as if the failure was the evidence, as the outcome was proof of something I'd been afraid was true all along, that I wasn't actually capable, wasn't actually qualified, wasn't actually the person I'd pretending to be. That's the secondary wound, and I felt it across multiple domains. The addiction, which felt like fundamental proof of brokenness. The channel in its early days, which felt like the proof of irrelevance. The relationship that ended, which for a moment felt like proof that I was someone who couldn't sustain that matter. These are different failures, but the secondary wound was felt the same. Here's what's actually happening psychologically. Most people, without consciously choosing it, build their self-worth on a conditional foundation. I'm worthy because I'm successful. I'm worthy because I'm loved. I'm worthy because my work is recognized. This feels like natural observation. They aren't. They are contingencies. And contingent self-worth means that any failure in the area the worth is contingent on doesn't just the outcome. It takes worth. Psychology calls this contingent self-esteem.
Hi, what's up?
Haha.
And the research consistently shows that people with highly contingent self-esteem experience failure more deeply, not because they are weaker, but because they've attached more of their identity to the outcome. The failure doesn't just say, oh, this didn't work. It says you are not what you think. And that, the identity attack, is what makes certain failures unsurvivable. Carl Rogers talked about unconditional positive regard, the experience of being valued regardless of performance. Most of us didn't get enough of this, so we learn to manufacture it ourselves by performing, by achieving, by becoming the person whose results justified their experience. And then failure arrives and the results are gone and the worth goes with them because it was never separate from them. The second round of failure is an identity crisis, not in the dramatic sense, not the I don't know who I am, of complete disorientation. The specific, the quiet, the corrosive one, where you keep functioning, keep showing up, but the inner narrator has shifted. Before the failure, I'm someone who can do this. After, I'm someone who thought they could. That shift from confidence to conditional belief is what failure actually installs, and left unexamined, it stays. It shows up as a hesitation before the next attempt, as a need to over-prepare because you no longer trust your own judgment, as the way you tell the stories of the failure to yourself and others, not as something that happened, but as evidence of who you are. The failure becomes the part of your identity, and identity starts to organize behavior around not failing again, which often means not trying again. So how do you actually rebuild? Not quickly, not through affirmations, not through immediate succeeding. It's something else to replace the loss of evidence of worth. Here's what actually works. First, separate the failure from the verdict. What failed was a specific moment, specific attempt in a specific time. What did not fail? Your fundamental capacity, your worth as a person, your right to try again. This feels like the same thing when you're inside the wound. They are not the same thing. The practical work, write the failure down. What specifically failed, what specifically didn't. What you actually learned, what would you do differently now. The act of writing it down externalizes it. It moves the failure from inside of your identity to outside it, where it can be examined rather than inhabited. Second, rebuild worth on a different foundation. If your worth was contingent on the outcome and the outcome failed, the answer is not to find another outcome to be contingent on. The answer is to find the foundation that the outcome cannot touch. Your values, your honesty, the quality of your attention to what you care about, the consistency of who you are regardless of what you are currently producing.
Yeah.
These don't fluctuate with your result, and worth built here is a failure proof, not because the failure stops hurting, but because it stops touching the core. Third, tell the story different, not to others, to yourself. The story you tell yourself about failures determines whether they become part of your identity or part of your education. I failed at this identity. This attempt tell me that specific thing that I needed to know. Education. Both are true. One is more usable. Choose deliberately which story you rehearse. I still feel the secondary wound sometimes. When a video doesn't land, when something I built doesn't work, when I compare where I am to where I thought I'd be. The old voice arrives at schedule.
It is a lie. They know.
See, this is who you actually are. But I recognize it faster. I know the difference between the failure and the verdict the failure trying to deliver. The failure happened. That's true. The verdict is optional. That's also true. Your self-worth was never supposed to be a result of your results. It was an argument you made. Probably early, probably without full choice, because you need to find a way to justify your own existence in the environment that made you early. You don't need to keep that arrangement. The thing that failed was real, but it was not the measure of you. It never was. It's 2 a.m. You told yourself you'd sleep an hour ago. Your eyes heard the content stopped being interesting 40 minutes ago, and your thumb keeps moving. You are not enjoying it. That's the strangest part. Nobody doom scrolls with a smile. You are tired and slightly disgusted with yourself, fully aware that this is pointless and completely unable to stop. I know this loop from the inside. Before this channel, before the psychosis, before the psychology, I lost entire days, not hours, days to screens. Games first, then the scroll. I've been on both sides of this, addiction and recovery. So today we are doing this like a detective case. The symptom, the suspect everyone blames, and the real mechanism nobody talks about. And at the end I'll give you the one change that actually breaks the loop for me. Spoiler, it's not deleting an app. I tried that twice, and I will tell you why it failed. First, the evidence. Look at the pattern honestly. When does doom scrolling actually happen? Not at 10 AM when you are rested, not mid-task when you are focused. It happens at very specific moment, late at night after a hard conversation.
Just say it.
I can't.
When a decision is hanging over you, when you are alone with something uncomfortable. Hold that thought. The 2 AM timing is not an accident, and I will show you exactly why in a few minutes. It's the key to the whole case. Second piece of evidence. The content doesn't matter. You are not scrolling because the videos are good. Half the time you couldn't repeat what you've just watched. Something else is being consumed. The question is what? Now the suspects everyone blames. Suspect 1. I have no willpower. That is the popular one. It's also the one I ruled out, and I ruled out through my own story. When I quit my substances addiction, the hardest thing that I ever done, I proved to myself I have a willpower, serious willpower. And then, clean and disciplined, I sat down and scrolled for 4 hours. Same me, same willpower. If the willpower was the answer, the same person couldn't beat an addiction and lose to an app. So it's not a willpower. Case closed on suspect 1. Suspect 2. The algorithm is too strong. Half true and the half truths are the most dangerous. Yes, thousands of engineers optimized the feed against your attention. The slot machine pulled to refresh, the variable rewards, all real.
I see it now. The path is clear. No longer a mystery, just execution.
But here's the problem, blaming only the algorithm. The algorithm doesn't decide when you pick up your phone. It only decides what happens after. Something in you initiates pickup, and that something is a real suspect. Which brings us to real mechanism. Here's the part that changed everything for me. Ready? Doom scrolling isn't a pleasure-seeking behavior. It's an escape behavior. You are not scrolling towards something. You are scroll away from something. Remember 2 AM evidence. Here's why the timing matters. Late at night is when the noise of the day dies down, and whatever you've been avoiding becomes so loud. The unmade decision, the feeling about your life you don't want to feel. The silence where the uncomfortable thoughts live. The scroll is a wall of tiny distractions between you and that silence. Every swipe is a microdose of not now. Not the feeling and not the thought. Not the decision. Just one more scroll of not now. That's why the content doesn't matter. You're not consuming content, you're consuming avoidance. And this is where my gaming story closes the loop. When I played games back then, everyone, including me, thought that I love games. Years later in therapy I understood I didn't love games that much. I loved not being in my life that much. The game was a place where progress was guaranteed, the rules were clear, and the real world couldn't reach me. The scroll is the same mechanism with worse graphic, virtual not nowness. And here's a psychology term worth knowing, experimental avoidance. The attempt to escape internal discomfort instead of feeling it. Research links it to almost every compulsive behavior there is. The phone is just its newest, smoothest delivery system. Your brain isn't broken, it's doing exactly what brains do.
It is a lie. They know.
Choosing a small immediate relief over a large uncomfortable truth. Every swipe is that trait repeating. If this resonates, like button helps to reach people like you who need it, and comment below if you felt this. The scrolling is really escaping. Now I can tell you why deleting an app doesn't work. Because I promised and because I tried. I deleted everything. Twice. Both times within 2 weeks, the avoidance found a new door. News sites in the browser, YouTube on the laptop. Once I'm serious, I don't scroll the settings menu on my phone.
Yeah.
There was nothing to consume and I was still swiping, because the app was never the problem. The app is the exit. You can lock one exit, the need to escape just finds another. Any solution that only attacks the phone is treating the door instead of the reason you keep running through it. So what actually works? The change that broke the loop for me, the one from the beginning. Before I pick up a phone, I ask one question. What am I avoiding right now? That's it. Not don't scroll, not a screen time limit. One question asked honestly, at the moment of the urge. Here's why it works when nothing else working. The escape mechanism runs on autopilot. It works because you don't see it. The question forces the avoided thing into the light for 2 seconds, and the named discomfort loses half its power. Sometimes the answer is I'm avoiding going to bed because next day is scaring me. And here's the strangest part. You don't even have to fix the thing. Just naming it breaks the trance. Half the time after naming it, the scroll simply loses its point, because the scroll only works as an escape from something unnamed. 3 practical layers on top of the question. First, give the discomfort 2 minutes before the phone. Feel it, it will not kill you. This is the muscle that everything else grows from. Second, make 2 AM physically harder. Phone charging outside the bedroom, not as the solution, as a speed bump that gives the question time to be asked. Third, notice when you are actually needing under the avoidance. Rest, connection, a decision made. The scroll is a counterfeit of all 3. The real version is always available and always avoided. I spent years escaping through substances, through games and through screens. Different doors, but the same room. What finally changed wasn't blocking. It was slowly becoming someone who can sit in the room. That's the actual cure for doom scrolling. Not a cleaner phone. A life and a self you are not trying to escape from. Start with the question tonight. What am I avoiding right now? That's the whole assignment. There is a specific kind of loss that doesn't look like a loss from the outside. You are functional, you are showing up, you are doing the things you are supposed to do. But something underneath it all has gone quiet in the way that concerns you. The things that used to matter don't quite. The goal you keep working toward feels arbitrary. The future you are building toward feels like someone else's future. And you can't explain it to everyone, because from the outside your life looks fine. Maybe even good, which makes it harder and not easier. Because you don't have the language for what's wrong. And the people around you can't see it. And you start to wonder if something is fundamentally broken, or if this is just feeling alive, it looks like, and you somehow missed that. I've been in that place more than once. The most acute version comes from recovery. When the substances were gone, when the immediate crisis was over, I expected to feel something, gratitude or relief, the sense of a new beginning. Instead, I felt flat. Not depressed exactly, flat. Like the volume had been turned down for everything that mattered. The things I thought I wanted, the freedom, the creative work, the travel, were available now in ways that hadn't been before. And they didn't land the way I expected. I remember sitting in place I wanted to live. It was Thailand, completely unable to understand why being exactly where I thought I wanted to be felt like nothing. That flatness, that specific gap between where you are and where you feel you should feel something, it's a meaning crisis in its purest form. And the way out of it was not what I expected. Viktor Frankl, the man who survived the Holocaust and built a framework structure from that experience, said something that recognized how I understood this. Meaning cannot be given, it only can be found. The problem with the meaning crisis is that most people approach it as a supply problem. I don't have enough meaning, so I need to find some more, consume some more, acquire some more. New goal, new relationship, new location, new self-improvement, system. But meaning doesn't work like supply. It is something you accumulate. It is something you discover in the specific intersection of what you value, of what you are capable of, and what the world actually needs from you. Frankl identified 3 sources of meaning. First, through work and creation, doing something that uses your specific capacities in the way that matters beyond yourself. Second, through love and connection. So subscribe fun, being deeply present with the person or the thing, without agenda, with a complete awareness. Third, through chosen attitude to suffering, the meaning that comes not from what life gives you, but how you respond to what life takes. The meaning crisis means one or more of this has been disconnected. Here's what I've noticed in my own life and the people I talked to through this channel.
Hi, what's up? Haha.
The flatness never comes from too little happening. It comes from happening not being connected to what actually matters to you. You can be incredibly busy and completely empty. You can be surrounded by people and be profoundly alone. You can be achieving visible things and feel like none of it counts, because business is not a meaning. Connection is not a presence. Achievement is not a direction. The meaning crisis is not the absence of activity. It's the disconnection of activity from value. Direction disappears for a specific reason. Most people build their sense of direction on external structures. The goal they're working toward, the relationship that organizes their future, the role that gives their day shape. And when those structure disappears through failure, through loss, through the achievement of a goal that turns out not to be a destination, the direction goes with them because it was never internal. It was borrowed from the external structure. Real direction that don't just collapse when the circumstances change comes from values so clearly understood that any situation can be oriented within them. Not what I am working toward, but what do I actually care about, and is what I'm doing connected to that. Those 2 questions answered honestly generate more direction than any goal setting system ever will. Here's what actually helped me and what I came back to when flatness returned. First, find what still has charge. In the flatness, when everything feels equally meaningless, there is always something that still has a small charge. A curiosity, an irritation, an unfinished thing that you keep thinking about even when you'd rather not. That charge, however small, is a signal. Follow it, not to a destination. Just one step toward it. Meaning rebuilds from small movements toward charge, not from finding the perfect purpose statement. Second, serve something outside yourself. That sounds simple and feels impossible when you are in the flatness, but it consistently the fastest road out. Not grand service, specific. One person, one situation, one thing that you can do today, not for only yourself. The meaning crisis is often a symptom of the self becoming too loud. The inner world too dominant, the outer world too abstract. Specific service to a specific person cuts through the abstraction immediately. Third, stop waiting to feel it before doing it. This is the most important shift. Meaning does not arrive before action. It arrives through action. You do not feel meaning and then create. You create and then, sometimes, not always, but often enough, the feeling arrives. The waiting for the feeling is a trap. The action in the absence of feeling is the way through. The flatness comes back sometimes, usually when I've been too long in the output mode, creating without pausing to feel what I'm creating toward. When the channel becomes a system instead of a genuine expression. When I notice it, I stop, not to fix it, to feel it, to ask it what it's telling me, to find the small charge that lies underneath the flatness, and then to move toward it, one step without knowing where it leads. Meaning crisis is not the evidence of that your life doesn't matter. It's the evidence that your life has been organized around things that don't match what you actually value. And that realization, uncomfortable as it is not the problem. It's the beginning of direction. You know the voice, the one that shows up when you're about to try something.
You are not enough.
What do you think you are? The ones that arise when something goes wrong?
It is a lie. They know.
I knew you'd mess this up. The ones that compares you constantly, unfairly to everyone who seems to be doing better. Most self-improvement advice tells you the same thing. Silence the inner critic. Override it, reframe it, replace it with affirmation. Build confidence until the voice gets quieter. What if that's completely wrong? What if the inner critic, the harshest, most relentless voice in your head, is not your enemy? What if it's trying to protect you? And what if the reason why it's so loud is because you've never listened what it's saying? My inner critic is very loud. It has always been so loud. Even during addiction, maybe especially then, the voice was there, cataloging every failure, every mistake, every way I was falling short of the person I was supposed to be. And I did what most people do. I tried to silence it. I used substances to do it. Then after the recovery, I used productivity to outrun it. Then I used self-improvement content to reframe it. None of this worked for long because I was treating the voice as a problem. It wasn't until I actually started to listening it. In therapy, in meditation, in a slower moments, that the busy life keeps pushing me past. And I started to actually understand what it's trying to say me. And what it was saying was not "you are worthless." What it was saying underneath the harsh delivery was "I'm scared. I need you to be more careful." That distinction changed everything. Here's what the inner critic actually is. Psychologically, the inner critic is an internalized protective voice. It formed early, in childhood, in formative environments.
Just say it.
I can't.
It responds to experiences where something about you was criticized, corrected, rejected, or punished. And your nervous system, which is fundamentally a threat detection and threat avoidance system, decided if I criticize myself first, I won't be blindfolded by the criticism of others. If I find the flaw before they do, I can manage it, hide it, correct it in advance. The inner critic is primitive self-defense. It was useful at the beginning, in the specific environment where you need to anticipate.
Subscribe on ShigaPOV channel. Subscribe on ShigaPOV channel.
Criticism to stay safe. The inner critic was doing an important job. The problem is that the mechanism doesn't update when the environment changes. You grew up, you change the original environment. The people who criticized you are no longer here or no longer have power over you. But the voice still running the same protective protocol, protecting you from a threat that no longer exists in real life. Jung called this the shadow. The parts of ourselves we've rejected, suppressed, hidden, that continue to operate from unconscious with all the energy of something that has never been integrated. The inner critic is often a shadow figure, not the true self speaking, but the accumulated judgment of someone who ever told you who you should be. If that felt familiar, subscribe. Integrated, it becomes discernment.
You are the best. Keep going.
Still running unexamined in the unconscious, it becomes the voice that stops you. When you listen to inner critic carefully, not to believe it, to understand it, a specific structure emerges. The criticism is almost pointing at something real, not the verdict it delivers. That's the distortion, but the underlying concern that's often legitimate.
You are not enough.
Who do you think you are to make this video? Underneath, I'm afraid to be not so good enough and I don't want to be exposed. You are going to fail again. Underneath, last time that hurt really badly and I don't go through that again. You're behind. Everyone is further ahead. Underneath, I'm afraid that I'm wasting time and won't get to the life that I actually want. The verdict is harsh. The underlying concern is understandable and the concern, taken seriously without the hard delivery, is actually useful information to what matters to you, what you are afraid of, what needs your attention. The inner critic is just a distorted messenger. The message inside the distortion is often real. So how do you actually work with this rather than against it? First, stop trying to silence it.
Subscribe on ShigaPOV channel. Subscribe on ShigaPOV channel.
The inner critic gets louder when it's suppressed. That is the fundamental problem with every override your inner critic approach. Suppression is not a resolution. It just makes the voice quieter on the surface and louder underneath it. Instead, acknowledge it, literally, out loud if necessary.
You are doing everything right.
I hear you, I know you are trying to protect me. The acknowledgement, the simple act of being heard, reduces the intensity of voice immediately, because the voice is trying to be heard. Give it that without giving it control. Second, translate the criticism into their concern. When the critics speak, ask one question. What are you actually afraid of? Not, is this criticism true? That question keeps you inside the verdict. What you are actually afraid of? That question takes you to the information. Write the answer. See if the concern is legitimate. If it is, address it directly. If it isn't, the clarity of seeing it usually diffuses it. Third, renegotiate the relationship. The inner critic formed a long time ago to protect a version of you that needed different things. You can renegotiate, not by silencing the voice, by updating the relationship, speaking to it the way you would speak to someone who was trying to protect you, but using methods that were no longer helping. I understand what you are doing. Thank you for trying to protect me. I'm handling it now. You can stand down. This sounds strange until you try it, and then it sounds like the right thing to say. My inner critic is still loud sometimes. Before publishing something I care about,
What is happening? I won't let this define me. Go!
before doing something that feels exposed, before choosing the harder path, when the easier one is available, but the relationship has changed. I don't fight it anymore. I listen for what it's actually saying. I translate the verdict into the concern, and then I address the concern or acknowledge it and keep going. The harshest voice in your head is not your truest voice, but it's not your enemy either. It's a protection mechanism that formed before you had better options, that has been doing its job faithfully for years, often at significant cost to your life. It deserves to be heard. It doesn't deserve to be obeyed. Understanding the difference,
Yeah.
hearing the voice without being controlled by it, is one of the most important psychological skills anyone can develop. What if I told you that one of the most psychologically sophisticated personal growth framework ever created is not a book by a psychologist, not a course, not a therapeutic modality. It's a space opera from 1977. Star Wars, on the surface, is a story about good and evil, rebels versus empire, and the light versus dark. But underneath that surface, in the structure of the story, the mythology, the specific psychology of its characters, is one of the most honest maps of the human mind I have ever encountered. The hero's journey, the shadow, the light and dark side, not as a moral categories, but as psychological states. The mentor who can only take you so far, and the darkness you must face alone. I watched Star Wars looking for this, and here's what I found. I want to be honest, what drew me to this? I'm not a Star Wars fan in a traditional sense. I didn't grow up collecting toys or memorizing the lore. What drew me to it was Joseph Campbell. Campbell, the mythologist, whose work on the hero's journey George Lucas explicitly used when was writing Star Wars, spent his life arguing that great myths of humanity are all telling the same story. The story of a person who leaves the known world, faces the darkness, undergoes transformation, and returns changed with something to offer. When I started to understand my own life through that framework, the addiction as a descent, the recovery as the ordeal, a rebuilding as the return, Star Wars started looking completely different. Not a children's movie, a map. The hero's journey has 12 stages, but the core structure is simple. Known world, call to adventure, crossing the threshold, road of trials, the abyss, transformation and return. Every significant moment of personal growth follows that arc. Whatever you choose it or not, the call to adventure is rarely welcome. It comes as crisis, loss or a failure, or a growing discomfort of a life that no longer fits. The crossing of the threshold is commitment. The moment you stop pretending, you can go back to who you were before. The road of trials is the work, the long middle period where the transformation is happening, but the evidence hasn't arrived yet. The abyss is the moment when everything falls apart, the darkest point, the death of the old self before the new one can emerge, and the return, which Luke accomplishes when he throws away his lightsaber and refuses to fight, is not a triumph, it's integration. Coming back to a world you left as someone who has been somewhere most people haven't been.
Yeah.
I've been through this arc more than once. The addiction was a death, the recovery was an abyss, and the return. This channel is currently the road of trials. You are in this arc right now. The question is only which stage. The Force in the Star Wars is not a magic. George Lucas, through Campbell, was describing something real. The Force is the state of alignment between what you are and what you do. The Jedi don't control the Force. They attune to it. They surrender to it. They act from a place of stillness rather than from a place of control. Compare that to the Sith, who try to dominate the Force, who use it as a tool for their own will, who try to control outcomes through Force rather than to surrender what is. This is not a mythology, it's a psychology. Flow state, the psychological state of a complete absorption in an activity, is the Force made real. It doesn't arrive through force or will, it arrives through a specific alignment of a capability, challenge and genuine presence. The Jedi don't try harder, they become more present. That's the lesson, and it's a real one. This is where Star Wars gets genuinely profound. The dark side is not an evil in the moral sense. In psychological sense, the dark side is the shadow. Jung's shadow, the part of yourself you can't integrate, you push into the unconscious, and which then operate from there, outside your awareness, with full force, in ways you cannot control. Vader is not a villain who chooses evil. Vader is someone who was unable to integrate his fear of flaws, his terror of losing Padme, and that unintegrated fear was weaponized. The dark side didn't take him, his unintegrated shadow did. Luke Trials is the Empire Strikes Back, the cave on Dagobah specifically. The Shadow Walk in its most honest visual form. He goes into the darkness expecting an enemy. He finds his face in a Vader's mask. The lesson Yoda is teaching is not to defeat your enemy. The lesson is know your shadow, because the thing you hadn't integrated in yourself will be used against you in every conversation or in every situation that knows how to find it. I felt this. The things I hadn't faced in myself showed up reliably in the relationship, in the patterns I couldn't explain. In a way, certain situations triggered responses that had nothing to do with the situation. The shadow doesn't wait, it shows up in disguise, through others, through a specific dynamic you keep recreating, until you go to the cave and look at it directly. Yoda is the most interesting character in Star Wars for one specific reason. He cannot complete Luke's journey for him. He teaches, he guides, he points. But when Luke asks to come with him, Yoda refuses. Not because he doesn't care, because the mentor's job is to prepare you for the part of the journey that only you can take. Therapy works like this. Mentors works like this. This channel works like this. Hopefully, I can share what I've understood. I cannot integrate it for you. The cave is yours, the abyss is yours. The return is yours. The mentor exists at the threshold to give you what you need to cross it. What happens on the other side is completely, necessarily yours. I still watch Star Wars differently now. Not as entertainment, though it's that, as a reminder of a structure. When something in my life feels like a chaos, I ask, what part of the journey am I in? Am I on the road of trials when nothing has arrived yet, but the work is happening? Am I in the abyss where everything has fallen apart and something new is about to emerge? The map doesn't make this easier, but it makes it less disorienting. The story was never about Luke, it was always about you. The call you keep getting and sometimes ignoring. The threshold you keep standing at. The cave you hadn't entered yet. The Force isn't magic, it's what becomes available when you stop trying to control everything and start showing up fully for exactly what's in front of you. May the Force be with you. I had to.